Senate Bill 311 amends the penal code. Currently, it is against the law to display a firearm in a public place with the intention of alarming people. But that provision has come under scrutiny because people argue against it in a right to carry state that it's confusing. So we wanted to make sure that we clarified that both for the bearer of arms, but also for law enforcement, that to display a firearm in a protest or within 500 feet of a public protest is intended to alarm. My main inspiration is that there is a tremendous amount of distrust of government these days, and a tremendous amount of distrust of one another. And in that environment, I really want us to get to a place where we trust our government and we trust each other so much that we no longer feel a need to bear arms individually. But until that day, I want to make sure that individuals who bear arms are bearing it purely for defensive reasons and not for offensive reasons to threaten others, particularly when others are attempting to civically engage, whether they're elected officials or whether they're other protesters. We saw a shootout on Congress Avenue this summer by 3 individuals who, under the law, were within their rights to bear arms. And it resulted in, tragically, in a death. I completely understand people, particularly in the Black Lives Matter moment, and they're concerned that their right to protest was not going to be protected by law enforcement. And I believe that that was what precipitated that tragic event. Hopefully, through this legislation, it would prevent anyone from bearing arms during a protest and level up the playing field so that we wouldn't have those sorts of tragedies again. And by happenstance, but certainly in retrospect, in a timely way, this bill was filed on the same day as we saw an insurrection in the US Capitol.
Yeah. Well, it's ironic because as of the summer's social justice and BLM demonstrations, we saw persons on the left deciding to not only carry, but open carry. So I wonder how Sarah may feel about that. But on the other hand, our constitutional freedoms are not one of those, it's not a checklist where you can only pick one and do one at a time. Your freedom of speech is constitutionally protected along with your Second Amendment freedoms. So it's not like because you're in a First Amendment zone that you give up your Second Amendment freedoms, or because you're in a firing range, you give up your free speech rights. That's not how it works. You have all the Bill of Rights all the time. I think Texas is a gun-friendly state. We've done nothing but make progress on gun rights since the concealed carry bill was passed in the 90s, and I don't see that ever changing. Well, of course it is. And that's unfortunate to have such a short-sighted legislation. Now, given Senator Eckhardt his new order job, but we would expect more wide-reaching legislation that talks about the entire situation and not just recent events. This kind of grandstanding really doesn't do well in the Senate, and I don't think it'll really see the light of day outside of committee. The pendulum always swings. Like I said, we were dealing with almost an opposite situation last summer. And although we're told they don't really exactly compare, we did see violent protests and people on the left carrying weapons. We actually had a violent altercation over the summer here in Austin even. So it's worth considering that this is more than just a way to get back at the right for what happened at the Capitol recently. This bill should be, again, more wide-reaching and 360 degrees in its approach. Right now, it seems just like a temporary political grandstanding, and that's not what we need in our Texas Senate. We need the Senate should be the upper chamber that looks at the bills a little more carefully and proposes a more refined legislation. And something designed just to make a temporary political point really doesn't have a place in the halls of the Senate.